Subcommittee meeting. It is March 17th. It's St. Patrick's Day. And looking out at the audience, I don't think anyone's wearing green. Oh, there you go. Chris Myers is wearing green. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and the first order of business is call to the public. Do we have any speakers, Matt?
Yes, Chairwoman. We have 4 people registered for call to the public. And our first speaker is Vanessa DiCarlo.
And maybe just before that, if the city attorney could just speak to comments, public comments.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Citizen comment. During citizen comment, members of the public may address the City Council for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meeting Law permits the council to hear the matters addressed, but prohibits the council or the subcommittee from discussing or acting on the matters.
Right. I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Meyer. So, Matt, can you recall the first speaker? I apologize.
Yes, Chairwoman. Our first speaker is Vanessa DiCarlo.
Vanessa, are you there?
Yes, happy St. Patrick's Day. Okay,
Great.
I developed a rubric to identify the city manager and city council budget priorities and initiatives. So number one, when I looked at the budget, I identified, do you center the voices of white upper class community, PLE, PPD, i.e. people who enact and support police violence and anti-Black initiatives? So yes. Were calls for input merely performative, never resulting in direct action, without input being scrubbed totally of any outcome that would hint at change? Will a hybrid modified program sacrifice or compromise the safety of Black and Brown communities, but still make certain constituents and PLE happy? Does the budget seek to ignore community-driven data, community calls for action, history of corruption, violence, or future attempts at innovation, Black and Brown leadership, and instead engages in denial and absolution of over 10 years of failed reforms and 85 initiatives that have all resulted in no change? Does the budget and rationale for funding mirror abusive relationships? This time I'll be better, I'll be nicer. If you were only more X, I would not hurt you. I know what's best for you. You're going to take what you're going to get. I think I'm a great partner. It's you that's the problem. I see no problem with my behavior. The budget clearly reflects a city manager council that supports state violence, political prosecutions, and history of corruption and violent police by giving tens of millions more for police and higher pay for police. The budget is riddled with duplicitous and deceptive modifications for the mental health programming. Housing mental health support in the fire department is insulting. The Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, the TLO Fusion Center, models a multi-jurisdictional relationship with PPD and the fire department, and a direct relationship with TRU and other agencies that were involved with political prosecution. Don't play the community for fools and bring in PPD through a backdoor initiative, all while funneling money through these other programs. It's insulting, and we see you, and it will not be tolerated. We want to defund the police. Listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Hannah Heyman. Hannah, are you on the line?
The anti-Black white supremacist city council are good at their jobs. They're not elected to represent us, to prevent us from taking back power that they wield over us. Black community organizations should not have to petition them to seek justice. But after a full year of comments, they've shoved these citizens' petitions into the subcommittee to strangle them. City Manager Ed Zerker is a powerful man, more powerful in many ways than any of the city councilors we elect every few years, and far less accountable because he doesn't have to face election. He hates us knowing who he is. He wants nothing more to sit in his little corner, shopping on his laptop and ignoring the cries of pain from the community. Ed makes over $330,000 a year, more than at least 11 of us combined. And for what? He is paid by the city to manage the budget, which is full of his white supremacist logic. He is paid to draft city policy, which he and his office use to strip power from the people of the city. And he is paid to oversee the most virulently anti-Black white supremacist murderous cops in a nation full of them. Ed Zerker is no fool. His career of anti-Black white supremacy was by design. He chose at every step to crush Black communities under the boots of his hand-picked neo-Nazi cronies. Ed is the city official the neo-Nazi Phoenix police need to continue their reign of terror, and he's all too happy to enable them. Ed Zerker and everyone in his city manager's office are our sworn enemies. And we will not stop until Ed Zerker resigns and the rest of his white supremacist city managers follow him out our doors.
Madam Chairman, did you want me to remind the speakers about the rules
Yeah,
for
I
speaking?
think so. No name calling, please. Appreciate freedom of speech, but we need to be civil.
I can read the statement that I
Yes,
usually do
please.
if you would like. The city code requires that speakers must present their comments in a respectful and courteous manner. Profane language, threats, and personal attacks on members of the public, council members, or staff are not allowed. A person who violates these rules will lose their opportunity to continue to speak.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker.
Our next speaker is Patricia Pagluccia. Patricia, are you on the line?
Good morning. I am on the line. Thank you. Good morning, Deb, Carlos, Betty, Felda. I just want to comment on the previous caller. There was no profane language used. Her tone was very calm and respectful. It is not inappropriate to say that city leaders are behaving in a white supremacist way when they are. These are real concerns, and we need to demand that you all take that seriously. It's not name calling. So please make sure you understand that, because this is the important conversation we need to have. And I also have a question. I believe that Mr. Myers said there is no discussion happening today. I'd like to know if that is correct, that City Council may not comment on the agenda items. Next, my comment is about the policy meeting that you all had yesterday, where Jeff came on with his Maya Angelou quote and said how good it feels to make this budget, which is an atrocity. And no, it doesn't feel good. Black and brown people are still being killed by your police. You're in a surplus, and yet you want to give them more money. It's a shame that you're not listening to the people that elected you and can and do have the power to make sure you're not in your seat anymore. That's not profane. That's not rude. That's just a fact. As far as agenda item 11 today, we have 7 citizens petitions that are being heard because you refused to hear one of them about demanding accountability from MCAO, that they drop all charges. That is still a demand. We'd like to know why that wasn't allowed to be heard as well. So please answer the question about whether or not council members can ask questions about agenda item 11 today. And please understand that calling out someone for being a white supremacist and upholding those values is not name calling. It is not a personal attack. A personal attack is when the police come and kill people because they are Black. I'm sure you all can see and understand that. And I do appreciate you tending to this very serious issue that we have been speaking to you about for an entire year. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but apparently we have to follow the rules and there's no discussion. I'm pretty sure it's also a rule that people, paid civil servants, shouldn't kill people because they're Black. But, rules are important in some places and not others, I do suppose. Thank you. I will yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. We are in call to the public. It is during this time we cannot speak to any issues you bring up. However, anything on the agenda we can speak to and we will discuss. Thank you for your question. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Sushil Rao. Sushil, are you on the line?
If you're silent against the citizens' petition, you are supporting Sally D's crusade to crush the citizens of Phoenix with the police force and police funding. We have uncovered to you all so much of the reality of brutality these past 2 months, and yet you still vote to give more money to the police and ignore the signs of toxic culture within your cops. What are you waiting for? More rape, more beatings, more murder? Communal awareness to police brutality and civic accountability is happening across the country. Yet somehow, here in Phoenix, we get a city council who'd rather listen to geriatric degenerates like those who follow Sal's white supremacy agenda. If we're going to catch up to society, we're going to have to be brave, stand up, say no more, and not allow the injustices of today affect the generations of tomorrow. It's been 2 years since the OAT was approved, and that took too much to make happen. Yet still, no work accomplished from that office. Phoenix grows in population at an exponential rate, yet regresses in social awareness and happiness. And you, city council and managers, are complicit in its continued destruction. Just remember, when we do return to normal, whatever that means, we'll be showing up to city council meetings in person so you can have to face us with your brutal support. Fire Ed Zerker. I'm done.
Thank you. I think most of us will be very happy to get back to normal and have meetings in public. The next order of business is the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a motion, or are there any corrections?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. The next are consent items 2 through 7. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. We have informational items 8 and 9. Does anyone want any more information on those two items? Hearing none, we're going to move to 10.
I'm sorry,
Oh.
Chairwoman, I'm sorry. I guess I just would like to understand Head Start birth to 5 monthly report.
Yeah, can you come down, Inger?
Sorry.
Chairwoman Stark and subcommittee members, we have a staff member who is on the line, and then Inger Erickson, Deputy City Manager, also is coming down. Thank you.
Good morning. Patty is on the line. She is the Head Start Deputy Director, and I think she can answer any questions if you'd like her to answer them.
Good morning,
guess
Chairwoman, members of the council.
I guess I just wanted to understand just a little bit more who qualifies for this and how does it work?
Vice Mayor, who qualifies for Head Start overall?
Yes, and how would people apply and what are the requirements and how do you qualify?
So, Vice Mayor, council members, to qualify for Head Start, it's based on income. They use the federal poverty guidelines, which the 2021 just came out in January. Families need to fall below or at 100% of the poverty guidelines. There are also some exceptions. So children in foster care are automatically eligible. Children experiencing homelessness are automatically eligible. Families that are receiving public assistance, such as TANA for SSI, are automatically eligible. We do take some over income families, but we're very careful because we do have a cap of 10%.
And then when can people fill out the application and what are the deadlines and how does it work on a year-to-year basis?
We do have two separate programs. We have Early Head Start, which is continual, and then we have preschool, which is based on the school calendar. So that would be August to May that children are in session. Families can apply anytime. Right now, we are in the height of what we call our application season, getting ready for preschool to start in August. Families can call our downtown number. We have flyers, we have banners that are out, we have ads on social media. We have contacted family members, previous and current, and asked them. We're running a campaign called Tell a Friend. So there's multiple ways that they can do it. They can also log on to our webpage, which is attached. It's embedded in the City of Phoenix website, and there's an online application that can be filled out.
And are there any guidelines that folks need to follow, or how many children per class right now during these COVID times?
So COVID is very different. In our childcare partnership program, there are no restrictions as far as class size. They maintain the 8 because that's the regulation. In preschool, the majority of the contractors we work with, which are local school districts, are asking for no more than 10 children in a session per day. And so they're doing some different variations of what that looks like, but they're doing cleaning in between. I'm hoping that when we return in August, that we'll be back to full capacity, which would be 17 to 20 in a class.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Those were all my questions. Thank you, Inger. Thank you for that.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful day.
Thank you. Okay, I think we can move on then to item 10. Rita Hamilton is here, our city librarian, to talk about a very exciting program.
Thank you, Councilwoman and members of the subcommittee. We are very excited to share a new collaboration between the library and the Parks and Recreation Department that brings a healthy, active approach to nurturing early literacy in young children. The Ellis Education Foundation is funding this project, and the library received this funding through the Library Foundation. We have enough funding at this point for 2 locations, and the first will be Cesar Chavez Park. Storywalk is an innovative and delightful way for children and adults to enjoy reading and the outdoors at the same time. Using the pages of beloved picture books, we create a trail that families can follow through the park and enjoy a story and some exercise. Each station on the trail includes both literacy and activity tips, which can be as simple as asking a question about the story or walking along to the next sign. Using sturdy metal frames with plexiglass fronts, it's easy to change out the content and to feature new stories. Each trail includes 18 to 20 signs. Maricopa County has 3 Storywalk trails that we know of. The Glendale Trail was installed 2 years ago. Tempe installed one a year ago. And there is also one on Pinnacle Peak, which is a great incentive to climb the mountain. We've learned a lot from the experience of other cities. For example, you'll notice that the sign in Glendale is lower to the ground and easier to view for your typical 4-year-old than the one in Tempe. We are excited about this safe and innovative way to support families. The grant we received will pay for 2 permanent trails in Phoenix parks. The Parks and Recreation Department will install and maintain the metal signs, and library staff will update the book content quarterly. The first Storywalk trail will be at Cesar Chavez Park, around part of the lake. The trail is marked in blue on the map. It begins just east of the library entrance and heads south over a footbridge and around the small island. This site was selected because it gets heavy foot traffic and is enjoyed by families, and because it's adjacent to the library. We hope to have that trail installed by Cesar Chavez Day. The first book that will be featured is a picture book about Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta called Side by Side, Lado a Lado. It is a bilingual book. As each trail is installed or updated with new content, we will give away free books to children in the community. And when it is safe to do so, we will also hold joint events with the Parks Department and Read on Phoenix to celebrate the trails. The next trail is scheduled for installation this fall, though the location has not been finalized. We look forward to expanding this project to additional park sites in the future. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you. It looks like a very exciting program, and I can't wait to see the results of it, and we can replicate it in other parts of the city. Are there any questions from subcommittee members? I think we're just all impressed, so no questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and now we're going to move on to item 11, which is consideration of citizen petitions related to public safety. Chris, could you give us a brief overview, staff report? Thank you.
Good morning, Chairwoman
Oh, I'm
Stark
sorry.
and subcommittee members. I'm Tony Macaron, Deputy City Manager. I'm here today with Chris Meyer, our City Attorney. Staff received 8 citizen petitions, and 7 of them are reflected on today's agenda. The 8th one, the Law Department determined was not eligible to move forward as a citizen petition, and Chris can explain the details behind the 8th citizen petition.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman's members of the subcommittee, the petition that Ms. Macaron just spoke to was a request that the City Council fire the police chief, Jerry Williams. The city charter prohibits the City Council from discussing or have any input on the hiring and firing of a director or any employee. So that was not an appropriate item for the council even to put on an agenda. So that petition was not brought forward. All of the other ones that were submitted and were received by the city are on this agenda for discussion.
Thank you. So we have a number of speakers. I think let's go to the speakers first, and then we can have council discussion unless, Carlos, are you raising your hand? Okay. I'm looking over the chair, and I see you. I wasn't sure if your hand was up. So we'll go to the speakers. And Matt, first speaker.
Yes, Chairwoman. Our first speaker is Will Knight. Will, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, council members. My name is Will Knight. I am a directly impacted Latino immigrant. I'm a resident of District 4. I'm a community organizer and I'm a local attorney. I filed this simple citizens petition about a month ago because it is apparent that we have a problem with our police department. In that month that has elapsed since then, 14 police officers have been suspended, and the city has had to come out of pocket for a separate investigation to dig into the misconduct that those police officers engaged in response to protected First Amendment activity. First Amendment activity is fundamental to our society. It is one of the most important parts of civic engagement. So I filed this petition asking this council to enact some more stringent regulations, guidelines, and discipline procedures, because clearly the system we've got right now isn't working. Those meaningful guidelines are necessary, and one of them would be to adopt the First Amendment Empowerment Act as a matter of policy, to reclaim disciplinary authority over protest-related misconduct from the city manager, from the boards that clearly have failed to do those jobs, and to discipline officers who retaliate against protesters for their political beliefs by cutting their funding, and by meaningful discipline, by terminating officers, by putting them on the Brady list, and by petitioning post to revoke their officer certification. I am willing to entertain questions now, if anybody has them.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Chairwoman?
Our next.
Sorry.
Oh, wait a minute. Carlos, I see you raised your hand. Councilman Garcia.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, process-wise, because I know Mr. Will Knight, this is Will Knight who had a citizen petition. Are we going through each one after citizen comment, or is this the time to ask people questions about their petition?
I think you can go ahead and ask questions now. As
Okay.
speakers. Thank you.
Okay. So, Will, I hope you're still on the line. I know you're a former prosecutor and you've worked on both sides of the, I guess, of the aisle in the courtroom. I wanted to know if you had, this is something that's really concerning to me, but just a little more around any rule suggestions or why, or explain a little bit also from your experience why the current rules may be inadequate.
Well, thank you for the question, Councilman Garcia. Just take a look at what has gone on in the last year. We had an unprecedented amount of civic engagement, people protesting and exercising their First Amendment rights to stand up for Black lives and to speak out against police brutality. And the retaliation that the community experienced was equally unprecedented. Like I said, 14 police officers have already been suspended. The city's coming out of pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars for an independent investigation. Police officers lied on the stand. They copy and pasted probable cause statements. They lied on probable cause statements even after they got caught with the copy and paste issue. The standards that we have for the last 10 years, we've been fighting for more meaningful accountability, for civilian oversight with teeth and investigative authority over law enforcement officers. And the most common response, the rebuttal that we are getting from this body, from the city council, from folks who do not find the political appetite to hold police accountable and to return authority to the people where it belongs, the rebuttal has been that we already have enough. We have multiple different boards. We have the discipline review board. We have appellate boards. We have all kinds of different review bodies, but none of them have actually done their job. If they had done their job, then back in 2017 and 2019, when officers were found circulating a celebratory challenge coin that was grounded in white supremacist philosophy, in hate speech, that was investigated and nothing was done about it. So how can we look at the system that we have right now and believe that it is even remotely adequate? The petition I filed is really simple. It's not nearly enough to do what we need to do to rein in these violent police officers, but it is a good first step to give meaningful guidelines to these police officers about how they are supposed to respond to First Amendment activity. And that means not just telling them what they shouldn't do, but also telling them what they should do. The tactical response unit of the Phoenix Police Department talks a lot about how their purpose is to protect political speech, to make sure everyone is safe, and to enable that activity to take place. We need to put guidelines in place that actually puts teeth behind that purpose, because it's clear we have an entire squad of Brady List officers who are called grenadiers in a civil society. Grenadiers, that's how we're responding to the people. And that's just so far beyond the pale that it blows my mind. That's why it's necessary, Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Patricia Pagluccia. Patricia, are you on the line?
Good morning. I am on the line. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. So I am here in support this morning of all 7 of the citizens petition demands that we did have to go through really quite a bit of trouble to make sure that they get heard. And my concern is really that folks had to take so much time out of their daily life to make sure that these important agenda items are heard, when we have been taking time out of daily life to continuously show up week after week at city council meetings to make sure that every city council member knows and understands that these are the important issues that must be addressed to create real community health and safety. And I just feel really sad and disappointed in the council members that you continue to ignore us and then put us through the ropes here to try to get these agenda items on. And I wonder why you didn't take the initiative yourselves to put these agenda items on. The demands are simple and clear. We want accountability from Phoenix Police. We want Phoenix Police to stop killing, terrorizing, caging, and harming Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. And because we all are clearly aware that that is actually impossible, the demand is to defund the Phoenix Police. Yesterday, you had your policy conversation where you applauded yourselves for your budget and said how feel good it is. But it doesn't feel good to know that police get $745 million a year to continue to kill and terrorize people. And the Tactical Response Unit, who again are neo-Nazis, we all know that, they get 60+ million. I wonder and really fear for the city of Phoenix why it is city council members are undisturbed by all of this news and refuse to hold anyone accountable.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Angeles Maldonado. Angeles, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good morning. So my name is Dr. Maldonado. I am the CEO of Vivara Maldonado Law Group, and we have been closely monitoring the ways in which the Phoenix Police Department continues to violate the rights of Phoenix residents. I have personally been involved in many Phoenix demonstrations demanding justice for those lost at the hands of police, because I am deeply disturbed as a mother with the idea that the city continues to normalize violence towards Black and Brown families in Arizona. As a critical race scholar, I am concerned with the deeply rooted systemic racism that exists within the Phoenix Police Department. And as a legal observer, I have personally witnessed multiple forms of physical and psychological state-sanctioned violence towards myself and others who attend these demonstrations. I want you to understand that showing up to protest is a courageous risk, inconvenience, and yet beautiful act of solidarity with families who are mourning the death of a loved one. I cannot stress enough that we are in the streets because our loved ones are being killed by this police department. Let me say that one more time. Our loved ones are being killed. The permanence of death cannot be undone, but prevention of future death is our collective responsibility. Now, I'm here today not just to speak words that you have already heard over and over and over again, but I am here because I am once again trying to bring to your attention in what you deem an acceptable manner an issue that you already know needs to be addressed. I am demanding today that you stop delaying justice. You were all elected to lead, to have courage, to listen to your constituents, and to solve complicated problems. This is not a difficult thing here. There is an overwhelming amount of evidence and testimonies from real people that come to these meetings and share with you, at times with shaken voices, what we are experiencing in Phoenix under your watch. What is needed now is action. As you know, I have submitted a citizen's petition demanding that you disband the Tactical Response Unit that is responsible for policing protests. This unit is toxically infested with a culture of racism and violence. These agents have committed multiple crimes and violations of rights and are responsible for carrying out military police presence.
Thank you. Councilman Garcia.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Dr. Maldonado, thank you for being here today. You mentioned you were a legal observer during the protest. For folks that weren't there, can you explain a little bit about what you're talking about TRU's response? And just if you could share a little bit about what part of TRU's response was inappropriate for the people who weren't there to witness?
Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, I wanted to provide my testimony. You know, I have personally been there, and there is a militarized setting that the city, you know, that the Phoenix police have created. They literally have pepper sprayed and tackled, pushed, punched, stepped, hit, chased us, and pointed guns at us in the middle of a pandemic. And it is a very frightening experience to feel like you are literally at war when you are simply there because there is continued to be no action and no justice towards, you know, for the families that have lost loved ones at the hands of police. And every time that we show up in the streets, when it's Black and Brown people, we see that this unit is biased and that they go out there with all of these guns and all of this like pushing, and I have been pushed multiple times. I have seen violence. I have seen the way that they treat demonstrators. And it's an absolute violation of our rights for freedom of speech, our constitutional rights. And I want you to picture yourself at the other end of those guns and understand that this pattern is unacceptable. Some action needs to happen. This unit needs to be disbanded. We need to know when something isn't working and make things right. And we are asking that the council bring this to the bigger meeting and actually take action and disband this. There has been, I think that I read it was 64 million a year that this unit costs the city. And they have gone out there and just violated the rights of so many people. They arrested 354 people were illegally arrested May 28th to May 31st. And so we had a lot of things that we included in our petitions, and I saw that that they said that these were allegations and opinions. These are not allegations and opinions. These are real experiences. These are things that have actually happened, cases that have been dismissed because there was a lack of evidence.
Thank you, Doctor. And for staff, are we prepared to answer questions on this? Is police here or Tony? Would we be able to ask questions of you all?
Chairwoman Stark and subcommittee members, Assistant Chief Mike Kurtenbach is here.
Yes.
In one moment, he will come down to answer questions related to the police department.
Good morning, Chief. Good to see you in person.
Good to see you, Chairwoman.
Chief, could you give us a little bit of background of TRU's, I guess, origins, what their purpose are, and just, and then that cost? Is it $60 million a year to keep that unit?
Chairwoman, Councilmember Garcia, with regard to the 60 million, I can only surmise that that's reference to the personnel costs for the people that make up TRU. Otherwise, I'm not sure where that figure came from. So I think it's just the actual cost of the people assigned to it. It's important to understand that there are multiple layers to the tactical response unit. I believe it was Mr. Knight who referenced the reason that they're created. I believe he quoted policy, in fact. So when we talk about the tactical response unit, there are officers that are assigned to the downtown operations unit, who are the primary responders for any events that happen in the downtown core, the complex, if you will. And then if there are incidents that are beyond the scope of the officers assigned to that unit, then there are others that can be called in from throughout the department, sworn personnel, generally uniformed, who work elsewhere if the scope of this situation is too large for those that are assigned to DOU, the Downtown Operations Unit, to handle. Their purpose, as Mr. Knight stated, which is the purpose of every officer, I would hope, is to allow those that are wanting to exercise their First Amendment rights in the context of this conversation to do so peacefully. But there may be times when they have to address certain criminal behaviors that occur to ensure that those that want to exercise their rights peacefully are able to do so, and to ensure that property is not destroyed in that process.
Just a little bit more on background on its existence and how is it put into play? Is it a decision that you all made? Is it previous chiefs? How did it come about? And you know, this petition is asking for us to ask you all to disband it. What would that look like? And I guess that's a question for Chris as well. So just how does creation, and then if you were to decide to remove it, what would that look like?
So Chairwoman, Councilmember Garcia, let me talk about creation. I don't recall exactly when TRU is currently constructed was created, but I know I'm comfortable in saying it's been around for at least 20 years. And let me give you an example. There was a time when then Governor Brewer signed SB 1070 into law. I was what was known as a field force commander at that time. So a field force is a little over 50 officers. I believe the exact number is 54. Our job when we deployed was to protect the Capitol. We were supposed to be the third level of support, Capitol Police, the Department of Public Safety, and Phoenix Police. But if you recall that day, the people that were on the ground were quickly overwhelmed. So our sole purpose was to protect property and individuals that were inside the Senate and the state legislature that day, so that being in 2010. That was my experience. We did not deploy any gas. In fact, all we deployed that day were shields to keep officers in helmets who were being pelted with rocks, bottles, and whatnot from being injured. So the purpose goes back to what I said before, is to deploy in a manner that allows people to peacefully protest, to abide by the laws of the state of Arizona and the ordinance of the city of Phoenix. That is their purpose. And where there are opportunities for improvement, Chief Williams has been very clear. We will constantly seek those opportunities to improve. And where there are violations of policy or violation of law, if they were to occur on behalf of officers, it is our duty to investigate those and to hold those that violate laws or policy accountable for their actions.
Is there a conversation after what we've seen in the last 2 months and the exposure of the coin and all those sorts of things? Is there a conversation within the department of disbanding, reforming, making shifts to this unit? And what you said earlier about 1070, it wasn't the beginning of it. It was just an example of another time it was needed, or was it ramped up or built because of 1070? I wasn't sure about that answer.
So, council member, what I was trying to do was say, I couldn't tell you exactly when TRU was created. I just was giving an example of when TRU deployed in response to a significant incident that happened. That was merely just an example of something that was over 10 years ago. Let me go back to your first question. I want to make sure I understand it, so I'm going to ask you to clarify, council member. You asked if there's been discussion in the department about the challenge coin in particular. Is that correct?
The challenge coin, TRU's behavior when it came towards, what they testified in the courtrooms, obviously the video of them talking about folks, all that's come out in the last couple of months. Is there conversations or is there an analysis of what this unit has done? Obviously, in my opinion, and in some of the callers' opinion, this unit, it's troublesome to think that the last time you could think about them being used is when a literal racial profiling racist law was being passed, and it was meant to protect that law. And so to hear what's happened in the last couple of years, that it's been used, and now to see how they've been acting towards people protesting or, again, observing their First Amendment. And so the question is, has there been an assessment of the information you've heard in the last 2 years? And are there shifts happening, or have you thought about disbanding this unit?
So you asked a number of questions, council member. If I don't answer them fully, please push me to clarify. So I want to go back to the example that I cited. It was merely an example to talk about SB 1070 and why TRU at that time was deployed. It was just an example to highlight that it's been around for at least 10 years, and I know it preceded that. Could be preceded by 10 or more years beyond that. That was it, just an example. To say that they hadn't been deployed since, that wouldn't be accurate. To the scale with which they were deployed May 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st, we hadn't seen that as a department in my tenure. So I just want to make that distinction. There was also a comment that Mr. Knight made about 14 officers have already been suspended. I believed he was referring to the 14 officers that have been placed under investigation, have been taken off of the street. It is inaccurate to say they have been suspended. They're entitled to their due process rights, just like any citizen is entitled to due process, and that requires an investigation. So you asked me if we are looking at these officers, if we're looking at violations of policy. Of course we are. We definitely are. We want to do so practically, methodically, working in conjunction with the city manager's office and city law to make sure that we do that appropriately. There has been some discussion already, which I believe you're aware about, and was referenced earlier, outside entities facilitating or taking the lead on those types of investigations to ensure that they are done as transparently as possible. So anytime there's a violation of policy that's brought to our attention, it's incumbent upon us to investigate it. As it relates to these employees and as it relates to TRU, these employees will be investigated in a manner appropriate with the policy violation that is alleged. I want to talk about something you mentioned with regard to testimony, and I don't believe if testimony was the exact word that you used. Is that the word that you used, council member?
I mean, I think that Will's petition talked about different places in which this unit and officers have been involved, specifically during the protest arrest. So whether it's the reports or them testifying at court hearings or grand juries, whatever it is that they're, I think that's the question.
Thank you, Ms. Chairwoman and council members. So let me do my best to answer that question. And I said this at Public Safety and Justice last week. I acknowledge that I do not have a JD. So I don't claim to know everything about the law. I certainly don't know the law as Mr. Knight does, but I think Mr. Knight would agree, as Mr. Meyer would agree, that grand jury testimony is sealed. We as a department have petitioned the court to unseal that testimony because there have been allegations made against our officers alleging misconduct, alleging, well, I'll use the word perjury, which would be them knowingly providing false information on the stand. There has been a news outlet that has reported that we have done that, but we don't have access to that information under the law. We are seeking to get that information because if we had an officer that in fact perjured himself or herself, I will maintain that it would be very hard to maintain that officer at all on the department. So that would be what we refer to as a Class 3 violation where termination is in order. It would depend on the nature of it and the intent of the individual. But I just want to be very clear to you, to the council, and anybody who's listening today, we can't investigate information that we don't have. We're actively seeking to get that information to determine if our employees acted inappropriately. If they did, they will be disciplined accordingly. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, but I think there's some that have been reported, like copying and pasting a police report or the arrest report. I guess, do you feel, and again, this is a question for you, and I know this is the chief, the TRU unit is necessary and has been doing what you said earlier was meant to do?
So, Chairwoman and Councilmember Garcia, here's what I'll say, and I'm not trying to duck your question. I'm doing my best, in fact, to answer your questions. What happened going back to May 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st is unlike anything that I have seen in, I'm just shy of 31 years on the department. Were there things that we could have done differently? Yes. Are there lessons learned? Absolutely. With regard to cut and paste, the specific reference, I believe, from Mr. Knight and others has to do with the probable cause statement that goes on a Form 4. This is not an excuse, this is merely an explanation. You won't ever hear me offer excuses, but I try and contextualize. When our officers were dealing with the volume of arrests that they were dealing with, and we could debate whether or not those arrests should have been made, but I'm talking about the Form 4 right now. They attempted to manage the volume in a way that they deemed to be as efficient as possible, which we have learned since was not the most effective means of doing so, hence cut and paste. It's a probable cause statement. That doesn't mean that the corresponding IRs, the reports, the investigative reports were false. That's a separate discussion with regard to that. But the cut and paste specifically related to processing a large volume of arrestees in a short amount of time so they could have their initial appearance before the court. With regard to the broader discussion about whether TRU is necessary, I guess I would ask a question in turn. So well, let me start with a statement. So the vast majority of people that were out on those specific days that I referenced, the 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st, I believe were there lawfully exercising their First Amendment rights. Those that were there those days, I think, would agree with me that there were some people that were violating the law. There were people that conducted criminal damage downtown of city property, police property in particular. On the night of the 29th, I was there outside of police headquarters when we had multiple windows smashed, and there was a group. I'm not saying it's representative of any of the people who have submitted citizen petitions today, but there was a group that willfully went down Washington, smashing windows, throwing incendiary devices into buildings I can only surmise because I get inside somebody's operation of thought, what they intended. But we saw elsewhere in the nation where buildings were set afire, that perhaps that was their intent. There's video that we recently released of officers even deploying fire extinguishers to try and put out fires. So to answer your question, if we don't have a well-trained, and there's always opportunities for improvement, unit designed to handle those that seek to cause harm to individuals or to property, then I guess I would ask, who is going to stop those that seek to break the law and cause harm from doing that? If we don't train officers to do it, then it's whomever responds. Do we necessarily want a 6-month officer who has no training beyond which she or he received in the academy and in field training to be that first level of response? I wouldn't be comfortable with that. I would rather somebody have a deep understanding of the law and their roles in responding to such behavior. Hopefully that response makes sense.
It makes sense, but I'm still having trouble understanding how if the intention of TRU is to protect people's First Amendment right, how it's turned into what we've seen in the last couple of months. And I know you weren't prepared for this conversation, and I think we need to have a broader conversation, especially about this issue. So I mean, I don't know how the rest of this conversation is going to go. I don't have any more questions on TRU, but I think it would be important to continue this conversation either in full council or another subcommittee so that we could be more prepared, or you could be more prepared to talk about it. So thank you. Thank you for answering those questions.
Welcome.
Thank you, Councilman. And thank you, Chief. Next speaker, please.
Yes, Chairwoman. Our next speaker is Derek Begay. Derek, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, City Council. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the details of my petition. My name is Derek Begay. I'm a Navy veteran with two deployments to the Gulf in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. I'm Indigenous, and I am a lifelong community member of the City of Phoenix. So I petitioned the City Council to create a reparations fund for all individuals directly impacted by the Phoenix Police Department's use of excessive force, as you all know. And by excessive force, I mean militarized, heavy-handed, tactical response to suppress protesters' First Amendment right to speak freely. I feel that reparations is a simple and easy first step moving forward to kind of repair the harm and damage caused by the police brutality that has occurred throughout this past year. Part of that, I would also include that all personal property from protesters be returned. Those that were involved with cases that were dropped or dismissed recently. I'd also like to see the financial reimbursement and reparations come directly from the Phoenix Police Department. That way there is internal pressure to create sustained change behavior and change culture inside the Phoenix Police Department. I would not like to see these funds come from hardworking taxpayer dollars.
Thank you. Next,
Chairwoman.
I saw Councilman Garcia first, and then.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I guess this conversation's first, I guess, to Derek, I believe was his name, Mr. Begay. What does reparations look like to you, or what exactly do you mean by saying reparations? Folks might not be familiar with the concept. And then the question for staff, is this something that's ever been done, and is it something that we can do?
Okay, thank you for that question, Councilmember Garcia. There's multiple layers when talking about the Um, the goal of reparations, the idea is to make whole or indemnify folks that have received harm, specifically from Phoenix Police Department. There's things that can't be repaired, but financial reparations would be a good first step. There's things where folks were evicted from homes because police were harassing them at their apartment complex, and that's means for them to get evicted just by some police knocking on your door. People lost jobs. People can get jobs. Families were affected. People were harmed. People were mentally, emotionally, and physically scarred and injured. Some of that stuff can't be repaired. But financially, that's a good first step.
Thank you. Mr. Myers? The question with regards to reparation.
Madam Chairwoman, Subcommittee Councilman Garcia, as we put in the report, there is a risk fund that is established for the city to pay claims against the city. The types of claims that were just described and that have been described in relation to this would be covered by that same fund. The language of establishing that fund says that it is for all claims. So in theory, there is a fund that is set up to do exactly this, and claims can be filed. There is a process in place. It raises a question because it says for all claims whether or not it would be legal to establish one. We would have to do additional research on that to identify whether one could be set up. But the starting point would be that it says all claims. There is a process. There wouldn't be a reason necessarily to set up a separate claim. But it would take some more research and specifics as far as what we were looking at and why. There would, however, have to be a process to submit claims and analyze them. Otherwise, we'd be running into gift clause issues and other things about making payments.
Thank you. Councilwoman, did you have a question still?
I did. I just didn't know if Councilmember Garcia was done. Okay. So I guess like my question is on one of the concerns that people raised was when they were, and I guess this is more a question for staff or for the assistant chief. I'm not sure who would answer this. So when folks got arrested and their property, was booked as well, did we return that property?
The chief's coming up.
Okay, because it was my understanding that a lot of people are still waiting to receive their belongings back.
Chairwoman, council member, to my knowledge, for all cases that have been dismissed and for which property being held is not considered evidence, all of those whose property was impounded is suitable for release. And if we have contact information for those individuals, they have been contacted so they can come pick up their property. What we found is this, and there may be people where I am mistaken, and that's where if your offices receive information regarding specific constituents or other community members, I would encourage you, reach out to me personally, reach out to us, let us know that there's property that's outstanding. But checking as recently as this morning, to my knowledge, all property that's suitable for release is available for release.
And is there any way where we can simplify that? I mean, it's been, I don't know, it's been almost a year, since these arrests happened. Is there a way, Chief, where we can simplify this a little bit more? So people can get their property back? I don't understand why is it when they're being released, their stuff is not there waiting for them. I guess that's.
So, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Guardado, let me talk about that process to ensure that everybody understands. So if we effect an arrest and there's an actual booking into the county jail system, and there is prisoner property that would go with the individual who is being booked, and then there may be items of evidence or property beyond which MCSO will accept, that will get impounded. that property that gets impounded at 100 East Elwood. That's why there's physical separation between the individual who's arrested and their property. That item or those items may be considered evidence. If they're evidence, then we'll wait for the court and the adjudication of that matter before it's suitable for release. To answer your question, are there ways we can streamline the process? There certainly are, and there are gaps we've identified since this happened. As I said earlier when speaking with or trying to respond to Council Member Garcia's questions, there are things that we can do better. I'm never going to be an apologist. There are mistakes that were made. A lot of that because of the volume of the arrests that were made. So we're seeking opportunities to improve that process to do exactly what you just asked of me and asked of us.
Great. Well, that would be great. I mean, if you can bring back some of that information, whether it's to council or whether it's to public safety, whatever we feel it's suitable, maybe we can follow up later on how, we can simplify this a little bit more. And thank you for starting to look into this. Thank you so much, Chief, and thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Phyllis Tyson. Phyllis, are you on the line? Phyllis, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
You're a little soft, but we can hear you.
My name is Phyllis Tyson. I submitted a petition last month demanding for City Council to create reparations funds for all individuals directly impacted by Phoenix Police Department's practice of politically and falsely prosecuting protesters. PPD was trying to ruin people's lives with these arrests and charges, and there's an abundant evidence that everything they did was based on hate, lies, and politically motivated in an attempt to silence us. We will not be silenced. We want justice. We want reparations for PPD's unnecessary and abusive violence. You say it is a violation of the city code to establish a separate fund for these claims. It is also against city code for PPD to behave the way that they do, and that doesn't stop them. City council members, you are the in-between for the people and the cops, between the people and the cops that try to kill us, cage us, and silence us. Reparations is absolutely the very least that the city could do for allowing Phoenix PD to respond the way they did to the uprising for Black lives. Do your job, demand justice, amplify our voice, demand the police stop caging and killing us. And in the meantime, create a reparations funds for individuals directly impacted by PPD's false political prosecutions. PPD recently asked for $15.5 million for overtime. However, 95% of the protests were uneventful. I'm not asking you to figure out the details of this. I'm simply asking you to move this petition forward to City Council, where the decision-making people will be in the space and can assist in making this decision. I am the public. I do not get paid to make this decision or help this decision out. I'm just asking you to do your job and move it forward.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Viri Hernandez. Viri, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay. My name is Viri Hernandez. I was Bullet in Action. Last month, we submitted a citizen's petition to terminate City Manager Ed Zerker. We are asking today to be placed on the agenda for discussion by the full City Council. As taxpayers, we pay the City Manager over $335,000 a year to manage the city. But what he has been doing is upholding white supremacy and has done everything in their power to hide violence, to avoid accountability, and to avoid transparency. In 2010, as Assistant City Manager, Ed led one of the first major task force on policing. Here we are in 2021, 11 years later, over 80 recommendations that have been made for police to change and have not been implemented, have not been tracked, and with the police department that is more explicitly racist and violent. Ed Zerker has allowed this. In 2017, this department attacked peaceful protesters, including grandmas and children. police chief and city manager came out with false claims saying that everyone left home safe that night. But that was not true. We had people hospitalized with injuries from the attacks from the tactical unit and folks that are still experiencing nightmares to this day. This was the same tactical team that the department that then created and sold these neo-Nazi challenge coins and celebrated their attacks. This is the same tactical team that created false charges on people and acted violently throughout all 2020 against protesters for Black lives. They have ruined lives with their violence and false arrests and lies under oath. As a result of that attack, we filed a lawsuit on the city, and the police chief and the city attorneys knew of this white supremacist coins years ago. There was no investigation or consequences. This city manager is killing our people and attacking especially Black, Brown, Indigenous people, and we demand for this to be put on the agenda immediately.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Ann Ender. Ann, are you on the line? It looks as though Ann is not on the line, so our next speaker would be Vanessa DiCarlo. Vanessa, are you on the line? Vanessa?
Hello.
Please proceed.
Hi, my name is Vanessa DiCarlo. I am speaking in solidarity with Black and directly impacted leadership on behalf of Katie Gibson, who submitted the petition last month demanding PPD immediately return any and all personal property belongings to the protesters who were illegally arrested during the uprising last year. Unfortunately, she could not be here today because, like all of us, she works and wasn't afforded the luxury to request time off again to be here and demand that the city council members do your job. It is absurd and unacceptable that we have to go through this process of writing, submitting, and defending a citizen's position to hold PPD and city staff accountable. If you listen to us at any formal council or public safety and justice subcommittee meetings this last year, we wouldn't have to repeat the same points and point you to these issues. Like all other measures related to follow through and accountability, should we expect an inefficient, irrelevant solution that does not address the issue? I honestly don't know if it's a lack of courage or if you actively support the violent anti-Black, racist Phoenix PD. Even after their charges were dropped, they still continue to be victimized and their personal belongings are held hostage by PPD. This is not acceptable. We know PPD cares about property and more than Black lives. As stated earlier, they seek to protect buildings during protests, however, have no problem being violent and continuing to kill Black and Brown people. They still, as stated earlier, those are false lies. They have not received their belongings after their charges have been dropped. So explain why you keep their belongings as evidence. Evidence for what? This is corrupt. Why hasn't the city followed through, the council followed through and demanded all belongings be returned a long time ago? Who on this council will ensure that PPD will return the protesters' personal possessions? When can the protesters expect to return? What is the actual plan without creating stress?
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Venable. Elizabeth, are you on the line?
Yes, I hope you can hear me, please.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, good. Okay, happy St. Patrick's Day. I wanted to say that I support all of the petitions. I have a variety of comments real quick. At various protests, I have been shot at with non-lethal weaponry by Phoenix PD and gassed, and had a number of experiences exercising my freedom of speech, which were not savory. It really taught me a lot about law enforcement, and it really shaped my perspective on law enforcement. As an advocate for the houseless, I know many people whose property is straight up thrown away. So that's another statement for another day. But I also wanted to note that I've been arrested, but not arrested for holding a megaphone, but not charged as a gang member, probably because I was white. Many officers behave like a group of racist thugs with impunity. And why are they not called a gang? And it's very scary. It's extremely scary to exercise your First Amendment rights in the city of Phoenix. Even if you are a bystander, it frightens people to exercise their freedom of speech. And I think that that is the overall effect of having these units be so strong and heavy-handed. And in summary, I would say I appreciate all of the petitions, and I hope very much that you will seriously consider reforming the police of Phoenix so that they behave appropriately. And
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Courtney Tilly Bisbee. Courtney, are you on the line? Courtney, can you hear us? It appears that she is. Courtney, can you hear us? It appears that we do not have Courtney on the line.
Okay. So, and basically,
Our next speaker is Brandon Valentin. Brandon, are you on the line? It does not appear as though Brandon is still on the line, so our next speaker would be Joanna Haygood. Joanna, are you on the line?
Oh.
It appears as though Joanna is not on the line, so our next speaker would be Hannah Heyman. Hannah, are you on the line?
How is it possible to be rude to a city government that pays neo-Nazis to murder Black folks? The only affront to decency here is that these white supremacist city councilors are still wielding power over us. These citizens' petitions are the bare minimum. The fact that you excluded some based on your arcane rules that I'm sure not even you understand is further proof that you do not care at all about the pain your policies cause in the community. The Tactical Response Unit is made up entirely of neo-Nazis. The neo-Nazi Kurtenbach knows this and chooses to protect his own. The fact that you didn't fire them years ago when you found out about their white supremacist challenge coin is more than enough reason for everyone here to resign. Chokehold Jerry Williams knew about these white supremacists and chose to protect them. The entire department is a monument to white supremacist violence and must be abolished. Kurtenbach sits up here and spews vile lies every time. Fire him and the rest of the neo-Nazis under his control. And Kurtenbach is right. The police on the Tactical Response Unit are well trained to protect property. They know their only purpose is violence. I saw plenty of harm enacted, and all of the harm was caused by the violent white supremacist cops. You want us to reach out to you and correct your lies, Kurtenbach? What's your number? We have more than enough evidence to expose every one of your statements as lies. City Council knows you're a liar, and that's why they call you up here every time. A full independent investigation must be engaged to expose the Phoenix Police Department for what we already know it is. The most violent...
Excuse me. Thank you.
Mayor, some of these comments have been personal attacks on individuals, which we said violated the rules. So just a reminder that we need to follow the rules or we'll lose the ability to speak, continue to speak.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Heyman.
You must immediately create a reparations fund for the protesters that you targeted for false felony prosecutions and return their property. Stop hiding behind your rules of decency. None of you are decent people, truly. You all sit here and protect murderers in the streets. Your cops murder people. It is well known that they are the most violent cops in the nation.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Chelsea Hickok. Chelsea, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm here today in solidarity with the Black and directly impacted people of Phoenix whose lives don't seem to matter nearly as much to Kurtenbach as a few broken windows, to demand support for each and every item in the citizens' petition. We demand you drop all remaining protest charges as they were brought because of unethical and illegal behavior from PPD. We demand an independent investigation into the PPD's wrongdoings. And note, I said independent because, as y'all hear later today, it's nonsense to think the police will actually hold themselves accountable. The TRU should be disbanded as their sole purpose is to violate the rights of protesters exercising their right to free speech. Jerry Williams needs to be fired, and I know you say you don't have the power, which is pretty funny coming from this powerful and white supremacist space, but you need to know that's what we want, so go ahead and pass it on. And her crony Ed Zerker should be fired yesterday for the lies, collusion, and total failure of leadership. At this point, we've all seen the reporting. It's very clear whose side they're on, and it is not the side of the community they serve. We demand a reparations fund be created for all those impacted by PPD's violence, because make no mistake, you owe them. We must create guidelines that prevent officers from lying under oath instead of having them coached by anti-Black scum like April Sponsel on how to get by on the stand. Lastly, we demand the return of all the protesters' personal property PPD is still hoarding. We have had to create the citizens petition because City Council has repeatedly refused to deal with the issues surrounding the corrupt MCAO and violent PPD, the gang we actually need protection from. Do your jobs, support our petition, fuck the police.
Excuse me, that language is inappropriate. Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Benjamin Lewis.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. How can you call these enforceable guidelines if we have a number of officers blatantly violating those guidelines on camera without repercussions? Insinuating that the process is working is gaslighting the community by insisting that this program is sufficiently working to hold our police accountable. It isn't. You mentioned being tied by the officer's Bill of Rights. We need to examine and dismantle that document if it is so blatantly standing in the path of justice, peace, and accountability. The department, including Jerry Williams and Ed Zerker, has known about and tolerated this internal rot for over 2 years. If we can't discipline our most armed city employees for violence against the community within 2 tax cycles, then we can't protect our citizens against our own employees. Phoenix police likes to say that they reassign bad actors, but what are they reassigned to? A lot of harm can come from a lying cop filling out reports, as we saw from the video reporting done by ABC 15, where an officer covered his body cam to encourage another officer to lie. These people's phones, there are phones. I mean, it's $600 to buy a new phone. You're asking people to spend sometimes more than rent because you are inconvenienced by the fact that they are usually filming your police officers doing illegal activity. It's so crooked that you still have these people's devices, and it's so harmful to assume that anyone can just go out and afford to get a replacement. I mean, people have lost jobs, people have lost houses. You've put people on the street and then thrown what they could grab with them while they were being evicted into the trash when you found them there later. You're not helping our community. You're wasting our tax dollars. And again, we're broadcasting to the country that Phoenix is a safe place for crooked cops. That is a very dangerous message to broadcast. At the rate of action being considered and proposed by City Council.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Anissa Groves. Anissa, are you on the line?
Hi. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to remind you all that calling out white supremacist commentary and behavior is not a personal attack. It is a precise and accurate way to describe behavior that systematically harms Black and brown people, period. Speaking of which, I need to respond to some of Kurtenbach's commentary from earlier. You asked if your answer to Councilmember Garcia's questions made sense, and yes, they make perfect sense in that it clearly exemplifies the white supremacist rhetoric that property is more important than people's lives. It exemplifies the racist rhetoric that we desperately need someone employed to make sure people don't step out of line and threaten a sidewalk when they use their voices to speak up about state-sanctioned murder of Black and brown people by police. So yeah, you're making sense, thanks. As for the rest of you, why do we have to create petitions to ask for what you should have done without any prompting whatsoever? It's even worse that it's written all over your agenda today that you have no intention of responding in good faith to our petitions. For example, you say you have investigations in process, but you know that they're not actually independent, but in fact rife with conflict of interest and amount to nothing more than cops investigating cops. Then you complain that our demand for reparations will violate city code. Are you seriously hiding behind procedural nonsense? Change the damn code. Do whatever it takes. The existing claims process is nothing more than a way for the police to have the city use taxpayer dollars to clean up their messes while the police themselves continue to be shielded from any kind of accountability. People's lives have been ruined by these prosecutions, which is exactly why the police and the prosecutors, and ultimately you as well, colluded in them to silence us and make us pay for demanding they be held accountable for being violent animals that destroy everything they touch. Nothing is going to make up for the falsely created criminal records, time spent in jail or prison, heal psychological trauma, recover loss of employment and reputation. And your existing claims process definitely does nothing to create safety or hold police accountable. But regardless, you need to do what victims are asking for because...
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Michelle Mayer. Michelle, are you on the line? It appears as though Michelle is not on the line, so our next speaker would be Helen Mendyzabal. Helen, are you on the line? Helen, can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you guys hear me? Hi guys. I had to take a whole day off to make my voice heard, and I'm really happy to do that, except it's kind of hard when we had to bring a whole citizens petition to make our demands be heard. I'm here to make sure that you guys hold your fellow city employees accountable for their violence and constant harm in the community. You guys have the power right now to transform this toxic system that was designed to cage and kill Black folks. It's really disturbing to sit here and listen to a police chief talk about, protecting property. We're here talking about Black and brown lives that are being constantly killed. And, hearing an officer talk about how property is just more important, we know what protect and serve means. It means to protect white supremacy and property only. And that's really disturbing. So I really hope that you guys take our demands to heart, and we're here to hold you guys accountable. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Dominic Benelli. Dominic, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Hi, my name is Dominic. I fully support these 7 citizen petitions. The Tactical Response Unit seems to only exist for the sake of silencing protesters and terrorizing Black and brown people. We see numerous officers on the Brady list in the TRU. They arrest protesters and bystanders without probable cause, and they inflict violence and trauma on us. We need an independent investigation into the policies and practices of the TRU because the police cannot police themselves. They must face meaningful accountability. Otherwise, it becomes clear that the police don't serve us. Their power doesn't come from us. I was one of those arrested during a protest last year, so I can tell you firsthand how the TRU manufactures probable cause through lies. In the probable cause statement for my arrest, the police blatantly lied, claiming that I assaulted an officer. This never happened. If you were to dig through the hours and hours and hours of footage that they have on my arrest, you won't find anything because this was a manufactured lie, attempting to trump up our charges. TRU is out to portray Black Lives Matter protesters as criminals. You cannot reform this kind of behavior. Now, I'm extremely, extremely grateful to have my charges dropped, but we still have protesters facing political prosecution at the hands of MCAO. I'm deeply concerned for these protesters, so I demand the disbandment of TRU, and despite the fact that you will not hear this petition, I urge you to enact a resolution calling on the MCAO to drop all remaining charges against protesters from last year. I yield my time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Marisa Leyva. Marisa, are you on the line? It appears as though Marisa is not on the line, so our next speaker is Lola Nsongu. Lola, are you on the line?
1 second. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. A couple of housekeeping issues real quick here. First off, I'm in support here with Mass Liberation Arizona in support of every single one of these citizens petitions. Chief Kurtenbach is either unqualified to speak on this, or maybe he's being dishonest when he says that the grand jury info is completely sealed. There was enough information that was published on local news media, ABC 15/protest, that you can see grand jury testimony in transcripts from the 1017 arrests where you can watch police officers perjuring themselves. There was enough evidence from public information requests that the media submitted to be able to make a Brady claim against these officers. So we went through, maybe Curtin wasn't there, an entire training, the last Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee, where we learned about Brady. And I want to remind people who are sitting here talking about the police budget as though it's valid, that a Brady violation is also to seek money that doesn't belong to you. That in and of itself is also a Brady violation. Kurtenbach also mentioned that the mistakes and problems of the PPD are due to the volume of arrests. And I want to be clear, we need to unpack that. These are conditions of their own making. You from the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee, you all know that. The ones of you who sit in that committee, you've heard this all summer. And I ask you all to be weighing in. I don't think it's fair that Carlos has asked all these questions. I think it's wonderful that he has. But your lack of preparedness around these petitions goes to show you don't care. You saw us coming. You knew these were here. You had a whole month to prepare meaningful questions to care about what the community is asking you for. When he talks about mistakes and the reasons why there was a volume of arrests, remember, he is also the person who came in and testified, or his department did, and the former assistant city manager, that 95% of protests were uneventful. Then yet say they still figured out a way to charge us $15 million in overtime. It's clear.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Kelly Kwok. Kelly, are you on the line?
Hello, yes.
Please proceed.
I want to echo past callers and remind you, as we all are calling and waiting our turn to speak, we are talking about loss of Black and brown life. And the cop, and all of you are talking about smashed windows and damaged buildings. You all want to protect buildings, and we want to protect Black and brown lives. In solidarity with Black leadership, I fully support all 7 citizens' petitions being heard today and demand you do your job and vote in solidarity with the community's needs. We shouldn't have to ask for these things. You should proactively be working for them already. I also support the 2 petitions you refuse to hear. We are watching and we vote. Do your job. Hold your fellow city employees accountable for their violence and constant harm to the community. You do have the power right now to transform this toxic system that was designed to cage and kill Black folks. It is unacceptable that you sit by idly. We see you. Get on the right side of history and support these petitions today. We want justice. Terminate City Manager Ed Zerker, who has allowed Jerry and PPD to ruthlessly attack and terrorize those who speak against them. The demands of Black leadership are simple. Create a reparations fund for all individuals directly impacted by the Phoenix Police Department's use of excessive force at protests, and for all individuals directly impacted by PPD's practice of politically and falsely prosecuting protesters. Either you side with us or you vote to uphold systemic racism, state violence, and the political prosecutions of your corrupt and violent police. We are watching, and we will remember when it's time to vote you out. I yield my time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Karen Olsen. Karen, are you on the line?
Hi, I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
Please proceed.
I have a quick question. When people yield their time and there is that extra bit of time, is that allowed to come back to the community?
No.
Okay. That was just a clarification that I needed. Thank you for your time. So I am showing up here in solidarity specifically with Black leadership of Mass Liberation Arizona. I fully support all 7 citizens' petitions being heard today and demand you do your job and vote in solidarity with the community that needs you. And just to be clear, you're part of this community. We shouldn't have to ask for these things. You should be proactively be working for them already. I also support the 2 petitions that were refused to be heard. We are watching and we vote. We are all part of this. And I'd like to invite you all Through the leadership of this amazing community, Mass Liberation Arizona, I have actually been given tools to fight my own white supremacy. And since you all seem to be so affected by the words like that and think that they're insulting, those are actionable words, and you have a choice to buy into that action or to change that action. So every time that you get upset in your body, take responsibility. I invite you all right now to take a breath, write it down, what made you feel that affected, and research it. I give credit to Mass Liberation for giving me that tool that I get to use day in and day out to know that when people tell me that they have been affected, that they have been hurt, that they know people that have died, that matters more than any piece of property, that matters more than any piece of a word or words that could affect me. I can see the depth of that well, and I can understand even if I am privileged enough to not have lived that experience. I can hear it.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Phil Martinez. Phil, are you on the line? It appears as though Phil is not on the line, so our next speaker would be Tina Luna. Tina, are you on the line? Tina, can you hear us? Tina?
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So this issue with the Phoenix police is not, it didn't just start this summer. The Phoenix police are just doing what police have always been designed to do, is to uphold white supremacy. And like other people have said, it's not, you know, bad language to use that term, because that is the actual purpose of police in the United States. And it's not an exaggeration, it's history. So I know these are uncomfortable conversations. Like the last speaker said, if you're uncomfortable with it, look into it. There's a reason why you're uncomfortable. We have been taught and brainwashed into believing that whites are superior in this world. As an old white woman, I know that this is true. But it's long past the time that we need to have these conversations. And you should all be ashamed at the constant misconduct of the police department. You know, the community demands better. We are not getting our $700 million worth out of this police department. That money is much better spent by the community, in the community. And it's really beyond disturbing that we even have to ask for the council to establish guidelines to prevent officers from lying, to prevent them from brutalizing and killing citizens. And why are we so concerned about property and not police brutality and not killing of citizens? And we need to put people over a pane of glass. How can we compare those two things? And if you watch the protests.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Jamar Williams. Jamar, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. It's super difficult to hear Chief Kurtenbach speak in theory as if it's fact. I've been on the ground a lot as a legal observer, and I've seen the police close up. We've all seen the police close up. As a legal observer, I should never have to feel the whiz by of a beanbag shot from a shotgun from the TRU unit. That's ridiculous. That's the level of violence we're up against on the streets of Phoenix when we're trying to exercise our First Amendment rights. Chief Kurtenbach talks about due process of police and protesters as if we're on equal footing. To be jailed falsely is not due process. To lose your job because of a false arrest is not due process. To get beat up and slammed in the street is not due process. To have your First Amendment rights brutally stripped from you is not due process. To have your property taken from you is not due process. being reassigned in the job you currently have not only never even enters into the realm of due process, it is outright institutional protection. Chief Kurtenbach says we can't investigate information we don't have. Chief, I don't know how you say things like that with a straight face. It must have taken you years to learn that skill. Cut and paste PC statements, he describes them as not the most effective way. It's literally unconstitutional to do that. That means it's illegal. If we didn't have the TRU unit, who is going to respond? Chief, you have over $750 million of resources, and you want us to believe that if the TRU unit is disbanded, you'll be stuck without any options? How can anyone who's listening to this right now think that you're here to help us when you say things like that? The city has been claiming to do something for over 10 years now. Community engagement and
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Gladiela Lopez Felix. Gladiela, are you on the line? Gladiela, are you on the line? One moment, Chairwoman. It appears as though Gladiela is not on the line, so our next speaker would be Rebecca Dennis. Rebecca, are you on the line?
It's hard to figure out how to do.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. It's telling that the 7 petitions I'm speaking in support of today are labeled as related to public safety, and yet they have been relegated to a subcommittee meeting that, in my opinion, does not seem to have anything to do with public safety policy. What a perfect example of the city's attempt to sweep the issues brought forth today under the rug. Over the last year, it's been clear what the city's priorities are: protecting a corrupt and violent police department, avoiding all accountability, and upholding white supremacy. The trial budget that was discussed yesterday specifically gave more money to make accessing public records easier. And the woman explaining that increase in funds specifically mentioned that that was the case because of the increase in people trying to obtain body footage from police officers. How interesting that the community is so in demand for this footage. It couldn't possibly be because they trust them. I'm here to ask you to listen to the people coming forward asking for justice, and that justice looks like disbanding the tactical response unit and launching an ethics investigation independent of the Phoenix Police Department and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office into the policies and practices of the TRU, and corresponding failure of leadership by Chief Jamar Williams and Phoenix Police Command staff with respect to the aforementioned protests and events. I want you to create a reparations fund for all individuals directly impacted by the Phoenix Police Department's use of excessive force at protests. Create a reparations fund for all individuals directly impacted by Phoenix PD's practice of politically and falsely prosecuting protesters. Immediately return all personal property to protesters that was they were illegally arrested, and you're illegally holding their property. And I want you to establish enforceable guidelines and meaningful disciplinary measures to prevent law enforcement officials at any level from providing false information and and lastly, just terminate.
Thank you. I believe that's all our speakers today.
Yes,
Thank you.
Chairwoman.
Thank you to all our speakers. I do believe in free speech, but I must say I have huge respect for Chief Kurtenbach. Thank you for answering our questions today. And also, I have a lot of respect for our city manager, and I certainly would not support firing him. I see Councilman Garcia.
Yeah, one of the petitioners sent a message to our office, Heather Hamill, and wondering if she's on the line. I think she had one of the petitions.
Chairwoman, Councilmember Garcia, she was not on the list of registered speakers.
But is she on the line? Because I know she was one of the petition folks, and we didn't hear that petition or anyone talk about it.
are you asking for again? I'm sorry.
Heather Hamill, she made the petition for B.
She was not on our list of speakers that I got, Councilman.
But as a petitioner, is she on the line? Can we have her speak, or? I'm just.
Don't think she's on the line. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So is this time for comments from the subcommittee? Are there any comments or questions? Councilman Garcia?
Thank you. First off, I think some of these concerns, I think one of the last callers pointed out that this is probably not the subcommittee to have this conversation. Some of these concerns have been brought up to public safety, and unfortunately, they have not been agendized. I think because we do have to have these conversations, I think I know it's tough to hear some of this stuff, but we had great testimony, great experience of people who actually been suffering through this. I think it's important for some of these conversations to move forward. So I'd like to motion to move petitions B, C, D, and G to full council to continue this conversation and information that hopefully we could have more answers both from the police department and from staff.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear which items.
Could you
B,
please repeat
C.
the petitions again?
B, C, and D seem to be jointly, so I don't know if they're going to become one or they're different, but B, C, D, and G, I think are ones that are important for us to continue the conversation.
So B and C and G.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Are there any other comments or questions?
So, Chairwoman, I have just a question.
Sure.
So just to begin with, this is a very, so I guess for me, like, I'm just struggling with all these topics are things that, as other folks have said, should be discussed at Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. And I know Councilman Garcia and I have requested some of these topics to be heard there. Chris, can you explain for the public how things are agendized at the subcommittee level? Because I feel like we've been trying to get some of these issues to be heard at Public Safety, and it just hasn't happened. How could we change that, or what do we need to do?
Madam Chairman, Councilwoman Guardado, the process for putting things on agendas of subcommittees is that the mayor establishes the subcommittees and the charges of the subcommittee, what topics or what areas would go to that subcommittee. The agendas are controlled by the chair of the subcommittee, who can then decide whether a particular issue that is raised goes on the agenda if it's within that subcommittee's charge, or whether it does not go on the agenda.
So then that's right. So from what I understand, as just committee members of these subcommittees, we have no control over being able to put these things on the agenda, right? It has to be the chairperson.
Councilman, that's correct. The chair of the subcommittee controls the agenda for the subcommittee meetings.
Thank you.
I believe, though, with this motion, this would go to the council at large for further discussion.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Vice Mayor?
I can't support the motion. Part of this is already under investigation, and I think an explanation on the proper way to file a claim against the city was explained fully this morning, that there is a fund there that can be accessed by anyone who believes they have a claim. And so I don't know why the council would need to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you. So if this were a split vote, Mr. Meyer would still go to the council, correct?
Madam Chairwoman, yes, at subcommittee level, if there is a tie vote, those items, our practice has been that those items go forward to the council.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion? Okay, I call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed? Nay.
Okay, it moves on to the city council. Thank you. Next is call to the public. I don't think we have any other.
Chairwoman, we do not have any additional call to the public.
We also have future agenda items. Are there any items the subcommittee wish to see in the future? Seeing none, I adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.